I want to show you guys the new application called Varo, which is an application launcher for Windows, Linux, and Macs. You can see here we have a list of applications that we've defined in a configuration file that show here in the application. There's various sections. The tools can be organized however the studio or user wants them to be. Users do have the ability to come in here and drag and drop to reorder the apps based on their own liking. If they don't use an app that is available, they can go ahead and hide those. If they want to see what apps they did hide, they can go in here and toggle those back on, and then go ahead and unhide those so they're permanently visible again, and then toggle that back on. They also have the ability to show the apps within categories, or they can show a flat list by toggling this on and off as well. For more on the developer side, you can toggle on to show the console, which will capture all the outputs for both logging from Python, print statements, or even executables. Things you would commonly see in a command prompt, you will see down here. We'll go ahead and close that. Next, we have icon size. Users can adjust how big or small they want their apps. We can go into the settings dialog where we have dark or light theme toggle. You can choose your accent color as well. I'll leave it on indigo. And down here it shows where our configuration files are located. So the Python is, I should say the path here, Varo path, you define that as a Windows environment variable or a command line argument, and that determines what apps and icons will display within Varo's application. Optionally, if you do want to support Python commands, you can define the Varo Python path and pointing to the directory of where Python lives, so when you click on a Python tool here in the main application, it knows how to execute it using what version of Python. Last, we also have searching. So if we type in Macs, it'll show all items that have Macs within their title or within one of their profiles. To get into the profiles, this allows users to kind of group together similar applications, in this case just different versions of 3ds Max, and you can tag them with different little bits of information. So maybe this is the default one we use for a studio, rolling out test versions or beta versions. So then what we have here are some live examples. So if I hit this Python, you'll see it'll execute a Python tool which will show up, and if I click me, we'll say 4 times, we'll close that, and you'll notice another one pops up, and this one it shows arguments. And that's because in the way we've defined our config file, which I'll show you here under examples, if we scroll down to Python, you can see here under commands I pass in 2 different types of commands. The Python one, and then I run another Python one, but I pass it arguments. And that's why we saw those in the dialog that popped up here. We can also launch URLs like websites, executables, which would be applications like 3ds Max. And it becomes very useful for studios that want to string together a bunch of commands to set up environments for applications. One of the common ones we see are things like 3ds Max. You want to set some environment variables beforehand and then call either Max or Maya following that, and it copies that environment and all those variables into that process being executed as well. So it's easier to distribute tools across a studio. One of the powers of Varo is it has hot reloading. To show you how hot loading works, what we'll do is we'll copy this, which represents an item here in Varo, and what we'll do is we'll create a new file, which always starts off with a list, and then we will paste our content in there, fix the syntax. And then what we'll do is we'll rename this. We'll make a new category called Studio. We'll use the icon arrow, which is already in our icons folder. That's how I know it's available. We'll give it a unique name, which this is used for just storing data relating to the app itself. So we'll just call it Note Test. And we'll call this Notepad Click. We don't need a description. We don't need a status. You do have the ability, if you want, I'll zoom in here, to restrict profiles or even applications to show based on a user's window Windows name or login name. You also, if you want, have the ability to do platform, which you can then restrict this profile to only show on Windows computers. You can do Linux, and you can do a Mac computer. In this case, we'll just have it show on all of them by not defining that. And then for our commands, we don't need arguments, so we'll get rid of that, and then we'll just have it launch Notepad. So when we save this, we'll call it studio.json in our apps folder. Then we'll hit save, and now the power of Varo comes back in when we come back over to here, and we'll see that it updates on the fly. So if we go to Studio, you can see our new app shows here. Now if I go back in here and change this to call Studio Test and hit save and come back, we now have a new category down here. So you can develop on the fly, and users don't have to close and relaunch Varo to get the updates that developers might be doing to the tools on the back end. Now we can click Notepad and we'll see execute. And that's it.